Hi everyone, so I'm super excited to film today's video, perhaps more than I've ever been excited to film a video. Today is going to be quite a bit different video than I normally do, but for anyone that is on my channel, I really feel this video is going to be very fascinating. It's going to apply to any of you, no matter what you're going through, because just has to do with like the human experience. But I'm going to be going into how mind and body are so interconnected, how I believe God designed everything. I'm going to go into how I believe God designed things to be spiritually, how I believe healing happens. Since I've been talking a lot about healing, I'm going to be more specifically going to kind of emotional healing and things like that. But I don't want this video to be a super long intro because this may be the longest video I've ever filmed. So let's just get started. Okay, so I actually have a whole diagram written out. So I've really been pondering over this this morning. So I was just talking to God this morning, and these are kind of theories I've been wondering about for like a really long time, kind of how all this is so ultimately interconnected, both on my own personal physical health experiences, but also seeing loved ones go through things and kind of making the connection between experiences they had been through in their life. So, yeah. So, this first, like I started first thinking about this because the Bible verse came up, guard your heart for the issues of life flow from it. And I just felt God really just helping me understand different things. And so that's kind of how this diagram came to be. But I want to get into this, okay? So first thing is first is I believe mind, body, and soul are interconnected. That God created them to be interconnected, that when there's a problem in one area, it affects the other one. Now, we are a part of a Western medical system that separates the mind from the body. So they believe that the mind is completely disconnected from the body, that they're completely separate. And I'm going to go into how it's all interconnected with the body, how this can lead to illness and things like that. I'm going to be going into all of it. But we have a Western medical system that does not recognize this. Like in other countries they do, but not generally in our society. I live in the US, so I know some of you live in different areas, but the US does not recognize that, you know? So, and I can only imagine like how far in advance we could be if we did recognize that, because I believe that is how God created the human body. Now, if we go into this, right, we have mind, body, and soul, right? So the soul is known as the mind, the will, and the emotions. So I want to show you already the soul is interconnected with the mind, because the mind is part of the soul. Okay, and then I want to also show you the mind, will, and the emotions. I felt God showing me, that we as humans, we are very led by our hearts, because this is where we feel emotions. This is where we feel pain, etc. And so the emotions essentially connects to our heart. Okay, and as I was pondering over this verse in Proverbs, guard your heart for the issues of life flow from it. And that was the verse I felt God leading me to this morning. I was like, wow, okay, so if our heart is connected to our emotions, right, it's where we feel emotions, then that makes sense that when we go through all these different experiences in our life, sorry guys, my mind's blanking out. When we go through all these experiences in life and we feel them in our heart, that, when we go through different pain and things, that leads us to live our lives in a certain way. So I just was thinking about all of this and I was like, wow, okay. I felt him show me that primarily, like I said, we are led by our heart. And just to kind of go into this further, we as humans, we are more hardwired to avoid pain than to chase pleasure. So for many humans, I mean, I can definitely say this about my life, we can deduce that, when we have been through pain, if we are wired to avoid pain, then whatever we have experienced on an emotional level in our lives, that does become how we live our lives, essentially, and different actions we take, etc. Now, why am I talking about the heart as well? Well, one, I believe the heart is very, very important, especially in the book of Proverbs. It talks a lot about the heart. It says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, or, it says, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. We also see, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So we see so much about the heart in the Bible, particularly in the book of Proverbs. But I was thinking about this and I was making this connection. I was like, okay, if our heart essentially is related to our emotions and it affects so much of our life, right? Then our heart is connected to our soul as well, because the soul, right, we said, is the mind, the will, and the emotions. So if the heart is the emotions, then it's connected to our soul. Our heart is. And that means the experiences we go through in this life is connected to that as well. Now, how does this connect to our physical bodies, right? Because we've made the connection that the mind and the soul are interconnected, as well as our heart, as well as our emotional life. Oh, thank you, Lord. So how I first got to thinking about this, I just was having a conversation with God, and I was just like, I've been trying to eat better, but I have dealt with like restrictive eating in the past, or my appetite will fluctuate like a lot. So I've just been trying to understand how to go about this without going kind of back into certain patterns. And like in the past, I've gotten very obsessive about eating healthy, because you're told all these things about eating a certain way, right? By, all these different companies, essentially, and different information outlets, if you go online and stuff. And they're giving nutrition advice and all that. And I felt God showing me, I felt him leading me to that verse in Proverbs, the heart. Guard your heart, for the issues of life flow from it. And then I felt him showing me, your emotional life is more important than even the things that you put in your body. And some people might disagree with that, but I was just like, wow, that's really, really profound. And then the Lord just was just helping me to understand that. And then there were different verses coming up from Proverbs, but I started just wanting to create this diagram and just wanting to understand how is this all interconnected, because this is something I've been wondering about for a long time. Like I said, both seeing loved ones go through different things in their life and seeing their health deteriorate, but also my own physical health struggles, also seeing other people, and just wanting to know how all of this interconnects. So that's how all of this got started. But I want to talk about how all this is interconnected. Okay, how does this connect to physical ailments in the body? Okay, so we said, right, that our souls, our mind, will, and emotions, and essentially emotions, we feel those in our heart. Essentially, we could say our emotions are connected to our heart. Okay, so if we understand in this way, okay, if we understand the different experiences we go through in this life, okay, I'm kind of more talking about painful experiences, but if we have these different experiences, okay, so for example, I have the words abuse and trauma written out on my sheet, okay, so when we go through different forms of abuse or traumatic experiences, or even you can even say, like, maybe some of you haven't experienced abuse, or some people will say, oh, I've never experienced abuse. So we will also put any painful experiences, any experiences that affected you in your life in this category as well. Okay. So what happens when you go through different experiences in life is, again, and it can seem minor to us, but understand that, like, I mean, I feel like we could argue every single one of our experiences in life has shaped us in a certain capacity, has affected us in a certain capacity, whether positively or negatively. If you think about when we're babies, okay, there was probably once a point in time where you were a baby and, like, you weren't anxious, right? And we looked at the world and we just saw it as this big place, and it was so fascinating, right? And then over time, we went through experiences in our life, right? And we started experiencing anxiety, we started experiencing sadness. But when we were babies, you're just a baby. You know what I'm saying? Like, you cry when you're hungry. Well, for one, you don't learn certain emotions are acceptable and unacceptable like we do from a societal level. But also there's probably one point in time, I don't know what your guys' lives were like when you were younger, but there's probably one point in time where, you weren't necessarily this anxious baby, But then over time, as we went through more experiences in life, we developed a sense of anxiety. And I believe firmly that when we experience anxiety, it's connected to different experiences in our life. It's your mind's way of trying to prevent the same thing from happening again that caused you some sort of pain or nervousness, or something that felt like a danger to your well-being or a threat. Okay, so these experiences, and again, whether you feel like you went through anything traumatic, whether you feel like you went through abuse or not, even if you haven't been through those things, okay, what happens is, after these experiences, there's stress as a result normally. There's fear, there's anxiety, and these are normal human responses to the things that we go through in this life, okay? Now, what does this stress and fear and anxiety do? Well, when we are in a state of stress or we are in a state of fear or anxiety, it weakens our immune system, and this makes us more susceptible to sickness. I was watching a video the other day. It was actually like one of Dr. Berg's, and he actually was mentioning, there's a part of our body, I can't remember what he said, but it waits till the immune system is weakened, and then these harmful pathogens or these viruses. This is what he said. Okay, so he said a virus in and of itself is not harmful. It's just like a certain kind of material. Okay, it's what did he say? What did he call it? It's just a certain kind of pathogen or something. He said a virus in and of itself is not harmful, but what happens is a certain part of the body, or the virus itself, it's probably the virus itself, waits till the immune system is actually weakened, and then it invades, then it attacks. So that's when it invades, that's when sickness happens, etc. So I thought that was very, very, very interesting. Now, to tie this in as well, so stress, fear, and anxiety, we all have heard of the fight or flight response, right? And this is connected to our nervous system, right? Well, we know our nervous system is a part of our body, right? And this is how we can see the mind connection with the body as well. But the vagus nerve, which is involved in fight or flight. So I went to a chiropractor for a little bit. By the way, if you have been through any trauma or anything and your nervous system feels like it is just broken and you feel like you're in fight or flight all the time and you're stuck in fight or flight, if you can, go see a chiropractor. You don't have to get like popped and cracked. I was very scared of that. But they can do something called adjustments, and it's basically almost like a massage. And then sometimes they'll use like a tool. But the chiropractor I went to, she was like an encyclopedia of knowledge, and she was just explaining how everything works. Chiropractic is not just like for your back, but it's actually, there are many parts of your back that are connected to your nervous system, connected to your vagus nerve. So when they're doing things on your back, even like adjustments, it's actually, they're trying to also kind of help reset your nervous system. I felt just absolutely like my nervous system was broken. It was broken beyond repair. At one point, and I felt God leading me to go to a chiropractor, and I was like, oh, like I don't have the money for it, but I felt him leading me to, and so I was just explaining my situation, and I was in such bad shape that she really helped me out, and I just was talking about the heart thing I was dealing with, and she was just talking about like, oh, well, sometimes there's parts of like your back that are like affecting your nervous system, and like they're affecting your heart, etc. I was just like, wow, okay. But moral of the story, if any of you are feeling like that, like I was, like I'm feeling so much better. I probably only got like 3 or 4 adjustments, but I'm telling you, like my nervous system felt like it was just completely on its last leg. And I do believe the adjustments that she did helped reset my nervous system tremendously. Because after the very first one, my like vision was clearer. I was having a lot of blurred vision. And my voice was actually coming out freer, and I was actually literally able to sit up like from a laying down position, which is something I was not able to do like before she did the adjustment. So for anyone that feels like your nervous system is just broken and you feel stuck in fight or flight and you feel like you can't get it off no matter what you try to do, I definitely recommend seeing if you can like go see a chiropractor or something, because when you're in that state, you feel like there's nothing you can do. So I didn't mean to put that in, but I just want to say that because it helped a lot. But anyways, from this person was also Christian too, so she like really understood like the design of the human body, how God created it, and I just was like, wow. So she had actually revealed to me that the vagus nerve is actually connected to every single major organ in the human body. It's one of the most important nerves in the human body. And I was just so like fascinated by that, because I had been wondering, I was like, how does this mind-body connection work? So when she had told me that, I was just like, wow, like there it is. But I'm going to go even more in depth in this video, okay? But you can see how if someone has been through different experiences, or someone has been in a state of stress or fear and anxiety for a long time, how it's going to take a toll on the body physically over time. You can see how all of this is ultimately interconnected, right? I hope you can. And I hope I'm not just all over the place in this video. But so that is kind of the first thing that I wanted to kind of talk about, this whole connection to how this is all interconnected, how mind, body, and soul are interconnected. And I believe that is how God made the human body itself. Okay. The chiropractor I'd gone to, she was even discussing his story of like the first chiropractic adjustment. This guy had like been in a motorcycle accident. He actually lost his hearing. They started doing adjustments on his like back and he regained his hearing. I was just like, wow, that's incredible. And I was like, you wouldn't think like the very hearing, and they're working on the back, but I'm telling you, you know, the human body is all interconnected. I truly, truly believe that. So what I'm going to be going into kind of more in depth in this is these different ways of living that we learn from our life experiences that lead to greater susceptibility to disease and things like that. And I'm going to be going into like, I can't even call it theories, but these are going to be kind of like more like personal studies from people that have actually studied this. So, and again, this is just for educational purposes. So anyone that can relate to this, you know, this is not meant to be insensitive if anyone has been through any of these illnesses or diseases or anything like that. So I just want to say that right off the bat. But here we go, guys. So the first thing we're going to start with is everyone has a fundamental, innate, core need to be loved and cared about. Now, this is really important for us to just know, because this is like, if you think about it, right? So, love and belonging, I think, is number 3 on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I believe it's safety and then food and shelter, unless they're in the same category, and then love and belonging. But it's a very, very primary, very vital need that we have as humans. So, it's really important to understand that as humans, because we have this fundamental need that is so important, we could even say to some extent that this need feels like it is part of our survival, at least when we're young, to be loved, to be cared about. So if we understand it in this way, that most of us as humans, this is what drives our behaviors, the way we live, the decisions we make, etc. Now, I will say this is one thing that drives our needs, but I will say the second is what I said, is that we are wired to avoid pain more than to chase pleasure. So I believe these are some of the 2 fundamental drives that direct our actions as humans and how we live, and is our need to be loved and cared about, and then how we are wired to avoid pain. Okay, so I want you to just think about that, because I've just been thinking about that. I want you to just think about that in terms of your life, okay? Because at least, whoa, sorry guys, there's like all these dragonflies just like flying around. There's so many, like, oh my goodness, there's like just a ton. I feel like I'm in like a sci-fi movie or something. Like, they're kind of big. but there's just like, there's so many, there's like 20 or 30, probably more than that, but sorry guys, it's not every day I see that. Okay, so if you think about just in terms of your life, this drive that we have, okay? Now, why am I going into this? Because unless you're someone that has gotten to the point where you just absolutely don't care what anyone thinks, which I don't know if anyone of us have gotten to that point, but I certainly know I have not. But if you go into this, okay, this is going to make sense, okay? If this is what drives us as humans, ultimately, these two primary needs and drives, okay? So because we have this need to be loved and cared about, we develop into this certain kind of person based on the different experiences we have gone through in this life that have shaped us, okay? So over the course of our lives, we learn what will allow us to be loved and accepted. And the way I would describe it is there are different coping mechanisms that all of us develop. And the way I'd also describe it is these different coping mechanisms that we've developed throughout our lives, they clash with our real self, the self that had not gone through these experiences, essentially. The self we were before these different painful experiences we went through. And that's what it's felt like in my life. It's literally like the coping mechanisms I've developed. And the person that I learn will allow me to be loved and accepted. I've often found that that person or those parts of me essentially will clash with my real self. And so throughout my life, I've literally seen like peaks of my real self just like come out, kind of almost in a sense where my real self is more at the forefront of my mind and my emotions and my actions for that day. I don't know if anyone can relate to this or not, but that's something I would notice, you know, as someone that's pretty quiet, pretty reserved, like doesn't really talk a lot. I've seen myself go from like the very, 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 very quiet person, particularly when I'm, you know, not feeling good about myself that day, or I'm feeling ashamed, or whatever the case may be. Versus there's been days where I've been like very outgoing and I'm like, oh, I don't care if anyone looks at me, you know, like just complete night and day difference. But I've definitely seen in my life those different coping mechanisms, essentially. Like, for example, me being quiet, that would be a coping mechanism that I've developed, versus, you know, your real self, that that's the person that you were before, like I said, before different experiences you went through, before different coping mechanisms you developed. And I would even say this person you are without those coping mechanisms. Okay. And I promise we're going to tie this in. I promise. So I will go further into this by saying this person that we become throughout our lives, the different coping mechanisms we develop. Okay. This includes what we learn will keep the peace with people, / help us avoid conflict, / help us be the person or act in a way where we will not have to encounter people's anger at us or disappointment at us, etc. Then we also go into this suppression and repression of the real self. So the parts of us that weren't acceptable, the parts of us that didn't feel loved, the parts of you that were maybe criticized, the parts of you that you maybe learned to hide, the parts of you that you learned to be ashamed of. And this can even go to the point where, like, maybe you had just, like, one negative experience when you were younger, right? And, like, maybe it was literally, like, not meant to be hurtful whatsoever. Let's say, maybe you were in a setting when you were younger when you were not supposed to be loud, okay? But you were told to be quiet or to shh. And let's say maybe it embarrassed you and you're like, you didn't like that feeling, or you as a kid, because our understanding and kind of perception of things and you know, what we can understand, like what's really going on, is pretty limited. So let's say you took that and you know, you felt embarrassed and you didn't want to feel that again. And so you learned from this experience, okay, me being loud isn't okay, okay? And so let's say, and sometimes this happens not even on a conscious level, sometimes this is like a subconscious level that this happens, but let's say you, whether consciously or unconsciously, suppress or repress that part of yourself, okay? Because you learned that wasn't acceptable, okay? And obviously it can go further to if parts of you were torn down or criticized, or you were made to feel ashamed of certain parts of yourself. It can, you know, include that as well. So it can be anything from just an experience like that where it was not meant to make you feel like that, to someone literally criticizing you and tearing you down, and etc. And of course, as well, like if you have been through different abusive experiences and you learned, hey, certain things keep this from happening, okay? So if you learn, okay, if I'm quiet, then I don't go through this, etc. Just different ways that you learn to be, to not experience those things. So you have the suppression and the repression of the real self by repressing or suppressing the parts of us that weren't acceptable or didn't feel loved. And again, like I said, it can range from a number of experiences that we do that. Okay. And then we have the suppression and the repression of what we feel. Okay. Now this is where we really start getting into how it connects with the body, okay? The human body, how it connects to illness, etc. Okay. So, and you can see hopefully how all of this connects to stress and fear and anxiety and having a weakened immune system, how all this connects to our mind, will, emotions, our soul, our heart, etc., our mind. You know, I'm pretty sure you guys can see kind of the connection of how this all connects. Okay, so this suppression or repression of what we feel, again, you know, sometimes it's related to keeping the peace, right? What will not make conflict? What will keep people from being angry at us, disappointed at us, upset at us, etc. And this, a lot of time, it is based on the different experiences we have gone through in life. What we have learned will lead to that. Okay, because I feel like the mind does not forget, nor does the body forget. I feel like it collects all of these experiences. They just accumulate over time till our mind has this like database of every experience you've been through. Again, some experiences are like pushed way back into the subconscious because they were like too painful. So I believe there are some things that we don't even consciously remember, like through our life, depending on how our life was. But if you think about it this way, there's this database in your mind of like a lot of experiences you've been through, perhaps most experiences you've been through, right? And your mind kind of making note, okay, this was painful, okay, this was embarrassing, okay, my safety was threatened, etc., etc., etc. Because you have to understand, even like, let's say you go through an experience where you were bullied or you were in class and like everyone started laughing at you because like you were struggling to do a presentation or something. I'm not saying I've been through this, but let's just say hypothetically, well, you were trying to give that presentation, right? And you might not think, well, that's not a life death situation, but to you as a kid, it is, because it's horrible, to experience being laughed at by the class. Okay, so you have to understand in that way too, like, just because it doesn't seem like an experience that was traumatic or life and death per se, or I should say like a life and death situation per se, doesn't mean that wasn't traumatic, that didn't affect you, that wasn't painful, etc. So even experiences like that can kind of be stored in the mind, essentially, and I believe in the body. So if we go into this, and I promise too, I'm going to be connecting like things as a Christian. I'm going to be connecting scriptures, or at least just how I believe God designed things to be, etc. I'm going to be going into this, but I first want to get into kind of the science kind of behind it, or how it's all interconnected. So if you think of your mind as like this database of a collection of your life experiences, then when you have something that reminds you of that experience that you went through and reminds you of that pain, what is often known as a trigger, okay, then, we can understand, okay, so the mind signal is sent in the mind, it goes to the nervous system, and then, your vagus nerve is being activated, and then you're in fight or flight. If we understand in that way, and we understand that stress, that fear, anxiety response, and how the different experiences that we go through, I believe that experience and the pain and the stress and the fear, anxiety, I believe they get like almost in a sense trapped in our bodies and stay stagnant in our bodies till we have addressed it. Okay. However, I also believe these experiences can be addressed in a way where God can do a healing supernaturally as well, which I'm going to kind of get into how that works, but I want to first make sure we kind of understand how this is all interconnected. So, if you have this database of experiences from your life, okay, and then stress and fear and anxiety is activated, right? And like I said, stress, fear, and anxiety can weaken the immune system, making us more susceptible to sickness, and you have this going on all the time, right? And it's taking a toll, not only mentally and emotionally, but also physically, okay? Okay, so, and then obviously I made the connection of how we learn to be the person that will be loved and cared about, okay, and to avoid pain, because that's how we are wired. Particularly, I believe the mind specifically is wired to avoid pain, and that's why I believe anxiety happens, because your mind has this memory and recollection of this painful experience or threatening experience, whatever the case may be. So then when you feel that anxiety and those strong sensations, your mind is remembering that experience that happened to you. And our minds, I know, guys, like they can be so much, what I'm saying? Like things can feel really overwhelming. It can feel like our minds are not wanting to help us when we feel so much anxiety or fear, or we struggle with different mental health struggles in our life. But our mind actually wants to protect us, okay? So the mind brings up that experience from what we've been through, and it is to protect you. It is trying to keep that very same experience from happening to you. And that's why that anxiety gets brought up, because it was painful and your mind is remembering that pain that you experienced or that threat to your safety that you experienced. And I encourage you to, like, if you have struggled with anxiety, it can be really helpful to look at it in that way when sensations are really strong. And if you can try to tell yourself, for example, if you're in a situation where you are safe, let's say you're working, right, but you have something come up, you have a painful or traumatic experience come up because something reminded you of that, okay? So let's say you're in that situation, it can be really helpful to remind yourself, okay, I am safe, my mind is just bringing this up because of this experience I went through, and it's just trying to protect me. But, I'm an adult now. I'm going to be there for myself. I am safe, etc. It can be really helpful to kind of, I feel like, disempower how high the anxiety can feel sometimes and the overwhelming sensations in a way, if you can just be reminded that, my mind is trying to protect me in this moment. That's why these sensations feel so strong. Okay. Now, again, keep this in mind because I don't want anyone to get this wrong. This is only in situations where like, hey, I'm not in danger, I am safe. Now, if you're feeling something around a certain person, keep in mind, your gut and your body knows, what I'm saying? Like, it can detect people, and if someone's toxic, if someone's harmful. So do not, try to, brush it off if you're in that situation. But I'm talking about in a situation where you're safe, your mind is just bringing up those experiences and those memories, and you're feeling these really strong sensations. So keep that in mind. I'm only talking about addressing them in that way if you are in a completely safe situation, and because that anxiety can really wreak havoc on your life when the sensations feel so strong, and it can keep you from doing a lot of things in your life, and it can make things that seem really simple feel very, very difficult, because the anxiety can get so heightened in certain moments. So just keep in mind, I feel like everyone knows that, but I just want to, make sure I mention that. Okay. So now, if we kind of understand all of this, okay, and we understand that we develop into this person that we think will be loved and cared about. Now, if we understand this way, right, and I said we learn to keep peace, not all of us, if you've addressed it, then, you're probably out of that. But, for many of us that haven't addressed it, just as humans, we are wired to avoid pain. So most of us, if we have not addressed that, we are going to try to keep the peace at all costs, unless you like drama. But, I mean, I'm probably going to guarantee most of us are going to try to avoid conflict and keep the peace. And if you have had experiences related to that being an overwhelming thing for you, we also, like I said, we suppress and repress the real self, the parts that weren't acceptable, the parts that didn't feel loved, etc., and suppress and repress what we feel. Now, how does this lead to the physical body? Many of us, we will learn to suppress and repress anger. Okay, now I'm going to first start with the anger, okay? Many of us have learned to view anger in a negative way, especially as a Christian, okay? I think anger is so important, and I think it's so important that we do express it, that we express it in a healthy way, but that you don't push it down, okay? So one way I like to think of anger, I've heard of anger, there are emotions underneath the anger that we are really feeling, such as sadness, things like that. But when I think of anger, I agree with that. But when I think of anger, I also believe it is the part of you that has never stopped fighting for you. When you feel exhausted, when you feel just so tired in your life, when you feel like you can't fight anymore, and I'm talking about even fighting to make your situation better, I believe anger is that part of you that has never stopped fighting for you. It is that part of you that reminds you, you deserve better if you are in a crappy situation, if you are being mistreated by people. It reminds you, you deserve utmost love and respect, and not to take anything from anyone, not to just take crap from people. And anger is also that part of us that is that healthy part of you that can speak up when something is wrong or someone is treating you badly, and can put up boundaries, important boundaries. And I'm going to talk about this because, yes, as Christians, we learn to look down on our anger, but even just as humans too. And I think this is so important. As someone that I used to be a lot better at sticking up for myself, even if it wasn't always verbally. To anyone that relates to this, I feel like we don't want to feel anger, and we don't even want to be angry, not only because it's not fun to feel, and it can feel like it's just going to overtake us, but two, because we judge or perceive ourselves a certain way, some of us, not everyone, if we are angry or if we feel anger. Okay. Anger is a sign also that different injustices have occurred in your life. Okay. Again, I think it's so important not to look down on anger. Okay. But I believe a lot of us, we see ourselves as a bad person or horrible person, or not, feeling the things we're supposed to or acting how we should if we feel anger. Now, I primarily bring this up on this channel that, I talk about a lot of Christian things, because especially in the church and in Christianity, I feel like it's very drilled into our head not to have anger. We're supposed to turn the other cheek. We're supposed to be forgiving. And I think these things are very important. But I think it's very important that we are not just... I'll give an example of myself. We're not just nice, kind, quiet, loving people that just push everything to the side and just brush everything off, For example, I'll give examples, of Jesus himself. Jesus had righteous indignation. Do you think Jesus, when it came to the Pharisees, do you think Jesus spoke to them just very, very, just very softly? And no, we see Jesus, he was rebuking the Pharisees. Jesus spoke his mind. And something else that I think is really interesting, Jesus, when he noticed things, when he discerned things, he spoke up on that. And I think it's really important, because if you relate to my life and my thinking, many of us, if you have dealt with being torn down or gaslit, we'll start to doubt ourselves, what we feel or what we're sensing or discerning. Because a lot of time we're sensing it and we're discerning it and we're feeling it in our gut. But because we want to be a Christian, because we don't want to judge people, we won't mention anything. Because I don't know about you, but it's I don't want to be that person that, calls something out in a person or is like, why are you doing this? I don't want to be that person. I don't know about you, but there are times when people are doing things, okay, and I find it really interesting, because I've learned, okay, I don't want to be that person. I'm not supposed to be that person as a Christian. But yeah, Jesus himself would point out things or just be able to discern it really quickly, like he knew when people were trying to like test him, or he knew when people were trying to snare him by his words, or he knew when people even perceived a thought in their hearts about him. But I find it really interesting because he wouldn't, a lot of time he wouldn't be quiet about that. Like he would just bring those things out in the open. This video is becoming more things than I planned on, but it's okay. I think this is so important to talk about. So, and I also just want to mention, the Bible says, we're to be harmless as doves, wise as serpents. And Jesus mentions a lot about false teachers. So, and, all the different things he mentions about false teachers. And I think it's really important that we I want to encourage you, if you relate to this, like I said, that we don't be scared of judging people. I'm not talking about like speaking things to people. I'm talking about just, what are you feeling in your gut? What are you feeling in your spirit? What are you sensing? These kind of things. Because your gut is never wrong. Okay? Again, if you relate as a Christian, it's like you're taught to see all Christians as loving, and everyone makes mistakes, everyone's human, etc., etc. And in the process, if you relate to this, we don't see people for who they are. And for me, I don't always catch red flags and really, really try to discern a person, because one, we've learned to doubt ourselves. We learn to doubt our perceptions, especially if you've been through gaslighting. Two, we don't want to judge. Or, judge wrongly. But I think it's really important that we don't worry about us judging. And I'm talking about, just checking in with yourself, bringing that in prayer before God. I think it's really important that we get past that, because if we're too scared of judging, we can miss who people really are. And sometimes that can be absolutely detrimental. So I think, and that's another thing, I believe God wants us to see who a person really is, and to pick up on these things and really discern them, and not care about judging, but it's like we need to see people for who they really are, So, I just want to encourage you, if you relate to this, to just get past this idea of judging someone, because it's a lot better for us to judge. And again, I'm not talking about speaking to the person out loud, but just checking in, with yourself, what you're feeling, what you're discerning. It's a lot better for us to do that than for us to be wrong and find ourselves in a detrimental situation. Now, I can connect this to our, mind-body connection, essentially, because many people in toxic relationships, And again, sometimes we can get involved in relationships because we didn't see red flags, or we didn't want to judge, or someone was a Christian, or they seemed very loving on the outside, and we didn't see someone for who they really are, or again, we learned to doubt our own perceptions that we were feeling about the person. But I bring this up because I also believe this connection when it comes to physical illness and different physical maladies in the body can also be tied to abusive relationships in any capacity, whether it's emotional, verbal, etc. And I believe the book of Proverbs talks a lot about these kind of relationships. I also just believe toxic people, being around these kind of individuals that just want to cause stress, it takes a toll on our physical bodies. Not only does it take a toll on our emotional health, and we can see, again, emotions connect to heart and connected to the soul because it's our mind, will, and emotions. So they really can wreak a lot of havoc on that part of us, but also us on a mental level, and then our physical bodies, because of how stress affects not only our nervous system, but our whole physical body. And I've said this before, I think, but I was just reading through comments one time, and someone was in a narcissistically abusive marriage for like a long time. I also bring this up because a lot of people don't really take this kind of abuse, or mental or emotional abuse, verbal abuse, seriously. You know, a lot of people don't take that seriously and think, oh, well, like, it's not as serious, and I completely disagree, and it makes me upset how people's experiences are invalidated. So I also bring this up because I want to show you the harms. This person was in a narcissistically abusive marriage for many years. Now, I don't know if it included physical abuse, but they literally said when they finally got out, they were diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Was this a coincidence that they ended up developing this? No, and I believe there's a huge tie to toxic and abusive relationships in our life, and being around certain people, and it affecting the physical body in these ways. This is also why I go back to the verse in Proverbs, guard your heart, for the issues of life flow from it. That, it is important. I don't know if this is what guard your heart means, but it is important that we protect our heart. That we are not just letting ourselves kind of be around anyone, like, just understanding this is another part of our lives that can affect our physical health. And yes, I speak this from like personal experience as well. So I just think it's so incredibly, very, very important. Some of us, for various reasons, we may not leave situations because it's very difficult, because there's a bond there, because it's physically hard sometimes. I mean, anything from getting restrained to getting yelled at to, for some people, threats, there's many factors. But I think this is so important. And I feel like I have seen people that have been through like abuse when they were younger, and then people are more likely to get into abusive relationships and marriages, and you just will see this cycle repeat in people's lives where eventually the health deteriorates. And I don't think it's coincidence. And so I really wanted to talk about this. And I also, like, my grandpa he passed away last summer, but he, you know, he didn't have the best childhood, and then I kind of just you can see, I mean, for anyone going through any kind of abuse, it affects you throughout your life. And then no one had ever really addressed what my grandpa had been through, and that just tears me up inside, because I watched my grandpa just go through a physical deterioration. And when he passed away, I couldn't stop thinking, had someone addressed his pain emotionally, had he not deteriorated in the way he did. My grandpa, he dealt with diabetes, and then he had like a sore in his foot from diabetic neuropathy, and so he got that removed. And I think that happened like 2 different times, and then it started spreading, and he had to have his leg amputated. And then my grandpa ended up getting COVID, and then after that it was like he there are so many things that he had, like, I can't remember what it was, but he had like 7 things that he was dealing with that finally led to him passing away, because we had a lot of times where we'd visit him in the hospital, and I would think, oh, like, this is the last time we're going to see him, and he would make it through all that. But my grandpa was sick, he strongest person I ever knew, but he was very sick. And when he passed away, I kind of started making connections between just the different life experiences he had been through, probably the different pain that he had carried, and then seeing this physical deterioration happen. Now, a lot of people might argue, well, he was getting older. And I'll say, yes, but I will say, what is the difference between some individuals being able to live really, well into their 90s, or even, 105, for example, and other people not being able to, and just dealing with all these physical complications. So that's how I got very interested in kind of just how all this works on top of my own physical experiences. But I didn't mean to kind of go off topic. But now, so I talked about anger, okay? And now the reason I talked about this, suppressing, repressing anger, is because I was listening to a video. His name's, I think it's Gabor Mate. I don't know how to pronounce it, but he's written a lot of books. He has this theory that when you don't say no, the body says no. The body says no through illness. The body says no through disease. And he basically is the one that made me start thinking about this. He says, I'm going to get it wrong. My mind's blanking. We learn to not live authentically. And by authentic, he meant, to feel what we feel. We learn to live based on what will allow us to be accepted. This person that we learn to be loved and accepted. And he talks about how, yes, so this isn't fully my theory, but he talks about how he has studied those that have ended up developing like autoimmune disease, or, for example, specifically those who have developed cancer or MS. And he has noticed similar traits within the people that he has studied. And he says one of those traits is that they're never angry. this suppression or repression of anger. And then another of the traits, he said, the people that develop these diseases, he noticed, for example, Lou Gehrig, he said that his teammates noticed that there was one time where he had like 17 places in his hand fractured, and he would never miss any game. And he'd be playing like in pain, and his teammates would be watching him. So that's one trait he noticed. People that will never miss anything, essentially, in terms of authenticity as well. People neglecting their own needs. And so he noticed this when it came to Lou Gehrig. He didn't miss one game the whole time he was playing baseball. And then another example he gave was this teacher that had been diagnosed with MS. Now, when she could barely hold the chalk like in her hand, she would still go to classes till eventually she couldn't walk anymore. But this was one particular trait that he had noticed amongst people that had developed these diseases, essentially. And he noticed something very similar with those that would have cancer as well. And he said that how this works is that when people are repressing or suppressing anger, for example, and he said, anger helps you put up boundaries. It allows you to only let in what is healthy and nourishing. And so he said, there's this example that, obviously the boundary example of when you're around toxic individuals and it's unhealthy, it's toxic to the physical body. But also he mentioned those that suppress or repress anger and have these traits of like repressing their needs, neglecting their own needs, etc. And he said what it boils down to is people wanting to be accepted versus authenticity. And like I said, authenticity being not neglecting your own needs, not suppressing what you feel, not being this person that is going to be accepted, but being authentic, essentially. So he basically had stated how when people suppress or repress anger, for example, it suppresses the immune system in turn. I believe he said it was the immune system. And what does the immune system do? It kills cancer cells. It kills different cells that are harmful to the body. And he said when people have repressed and suppressed it to such a certain point that the immune system stops working properly to be able to kill those cells and other ones. And this is how autoimmune diseases develop, for example. So this is his theory, but I thought it was just very fascinating. And we can see this link to the mind-body connection and how this all interconnects. But the last thing I want to go into is something called TMS, and TMS stands for Attention Myositis Syndrome. Now, this is a theory coined by someone named Dr. Sarno, but basically what TMS is it is learned pain neural pathways. So these pathways in the brain, but they affect the physical body. They can create physical pain in the body, okay? Now, when we go into this, I bring this up, and I brought that up because what TMS kind of relates to, essentially, or what fuels it is anger and other emotions that the mind and body deems as too dangerous or too painful to feel. Okay, so basically, the body creates this pain. Okay, but you have to understand it's learned neural pain pathways. So living in a bunch of fear, living in a bunch of anxiety, that can create this physical pain in the body, but it's trying to distract the brain from feeling this anger. For example, if you feel angry at someone in your life, and it's not safe for you to be angry because it's like, well, this person's going to be mad at you, or this person is going to do something, or, whatever the case may be, then the brain uses the pain as a distraction to keep you from feeling that anger and really being able to express it. And any other emotions too painful for your brain deems as too painful for you to feel. So it creates these physical pains in the body, and it can be anything from, like, literally people have stories of like being in such severe back pain they had to like go to the hospital. There was someone that had dealt with sciatica. There was someone that literally was in a wheelchair, and they started addressing like all the things that they had been through in their life emotionally, particularly because it's really about emotionally that is kind of driving everything. But there was someone that was in a wheelchair, and once they had resolved kind of all these things they had been through in their life, they were out of a wheelchair actually able to play golf. So, which I just find so astounding. But anyways, so this TMS can be any number of things. It can even be like symptoms that might not seem like they're pain related. You could have like maybe like a fast heart rate that could be TMS related. It's any number of things, but essentially it is this pain or distraction that the brain creates to keep you from feeling certain emotions. And then there are certain traits that can fuel TMS. I believe like perfectionism is a really big one. I can actually look at different TMS traits if you want me to pull them up. But yeah, basically what is happening on a physical level is TMS traits. TMS personality traits. Basically what is happening is your body is cutting off blood flow to a certain part of your body to create this pain, right? So that's where the tension comes in. It's cutting off blood flow. It's creating tension. Like I said, it's a learned neural pathway. So things like fear, things like anxiety, stress, frustration can fuel this. And then certain personality traits, and again, that are probably learned from different life experiences that people have been through, that they develop these different personality traits. But basically, that is what is happening on a physical level, but the brain is kind of creating those physical pains in the body to distract the person from feeling that anger or any other emotions that are either not safe for them to feel or too painful for them to feel. So it's very interesting if you think of it in that way. If someone has emotional pain, it's almost like the body is creating and the brain is creating physical pain that really is due to this emotional pain the individual may be feeling. So different personality traits. Here we go. And here's another thing. People can even be diagnosed with different things from a doctor, such as sciatica, or they can be experiencing this pain and the doctor might not see anything. But this can literally be created by like your mind and your body, again, from different pain and emotional experiences that you've been through in your life. But again, as a Western medical system, we have not tapped into this. So you can find this information online. It's very, very fascinating. Obviously, I started getting into it based on throat stuff I was dealing with, and heart stuff as well, just different physical things coming up, because I understood, because I had dealt with a lot of stuff mentally previously to that. I understood like there was something kind of deeper to that, all this emotional stuff that I hadn't maybe processed and addressed, because for me, everything started off mentally and emotionally for a long time, and then I started dealing with physical things. But again, I also was not in the best environment. So perfectionism is a really big one. Set very high standards, often overly critical when they fail to meet those standards. Strive to succeed at every activity. Take on more than they can handle. Often ignore their own needs and emotions in pursuit of an idealized version of themselves. I'm laughing because it describes me to a T. Goodism. People who please others at their own expense, seek approval and validation from those around them. So basically, I've seen Sarno describe goodism as you have this just need to want to be a good person, and sometimes it can be from a good place, but sometimes it is because of like it says, deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and low self-worth. So sometimes that can be driving it. And I would even say, wanting to be a good person or be perceived as a good person, because then you think it will allow you to be more loved and cared about. Stoicism is the next one. Tendency to repress their emotions or deny their feelings, which can lead to tension and pain in the body. May perceive sharing their feelings and emotions with others as an uncomfortable task. Tend to display little or no overt signs of emotions such as anger, sadness, love, or sorrow. Anxiety and fear, which I mentioned. Low self-esteem. Hostility and aggression as well. Okay, so this makes sense. Because I've said anger, sometimes there's another emotion behind it. So instead of someone wanting to feel that sadness, it comes out in the form of anger. Dependency. Have difficulty asserting own needs and boundaries. Okay, so there's just a few, essentially. But we're kind of seeing kind of a combination, kind of with this need to be loved and cared about, and then, how the different actions kind of someone may take illustrate that. Okay, so here's more. Chronic people pleasing, need for control, hard on oneself, judgmental, restlessness, repression, rejection, denial of feelings or beliefs deemed imperfect or negative. But at the root of these mind-body connections, particularly TMS, is fear. Okay, so now in this latter part of the video, I'm going to be going into how I believe God created things to be, okay? I'm going to be going into a few kind of ways that I believe, I'm going to have to open this door. Okay, hopefully you guys can still hear me. There's like kids yelling because I'm by a school and they're on the playground. So, precious. Okay, so here we go. Now, one of the big reasons I went into this, other than the fact that I think it's so fascinating and understanding how all this is interconnected, and I will just say I've seen huge improvement in just kind of understanding things in this way when it comes to my own throat stuff, and just different physical struggles that I have been dealing with. But it also is really interesting because it can show you kind of what parts of your life you need to like address, what's not working, and I do believe sometimes, I'd say, physical things can be spiritual, and I agree with that, but I believe sometimes it is our physical bodies really trying to speak to us and, show us, things that are not working, things that need to change. And I do believe if we listen to them, because our mind, body, and soul are interconnected, that they will lead us in better paths for our life. But I believe we haven't been taught to look at things in that way because of the Western medical system we live in. For those that don't live in the US, we basically, when we have a physical condition, we go to like the doctor or the hospital and they give a diagnosis, and then, there's not really any questions asked of like, did you go through, a certain experience before this started happening? There's none of those kind of questions or anything, it's like they want to give you medication, or do surgery. I mean, that's basically the system, how it's set up. Now, I talk about this because I believe there are so many people that are carrying so much emotional pain in this life. I think we are practically kind of brainwashed to do that because we are taught that our emotions are not really acceptable. We are taught to be a certain way. We're taught to always have a smile on our face, to always be positive. There are certain situations where you feel like it's not acceptable for you to cry. We are taught to be ashamed of our emotions, and yet it makes us human to feel, and it's so very important that we address our emotions because I believe they accumulate over time and they just get trapped and like stuck in the body and just stagnant. Okay, so the first thing I want to go into is that I believe God designed things in a way where we are supposed to get our emotions out, have a place to lay our burdens down. And it reminds me of the verse, cast your cares, cast all your anxieties on the Lord. And I will say that is a really big shift I've had in my relationship with God, where that is something I'm more focused on in my relationship with God is, maybe not always looking at my outside circumstances, kind of what's happening, but really seeing God as this person that I can lay all my burdens down to, I can lift all my emotions up to, this place where I can just release all my pain, and just seeing God in that way, because that is who He is. I believe God designed things where we are not supposed to just keep everything inside. And I don't even mean just having people for support, because sometimes you don't have that support, but I mean knowing He is with you in everything, knowing He is always waiting in His love for you, that you can bring Him anything, and just the very importance of getting our emotions out on a regular basis. All those things that weigh heavy, all those things that we can't seem to figure out, all those worries, all those cares, all those fears, all those anxieties, all our pain. So I will just first start with that. And I believe God knows, of course He knows, He designed the human body, but it is designed in such a way where if there is a problem in one area, it affects the other. And I believe our emotions are so important to address them, and how they affect so much of our life. And God, did not create us to do life alone, but no matter what we are going through, to know that He is with us, and He is the one waiting to embrace you in the midst of whatever you are feeling and whatever you are going through. And just, like I said, having a place in Him to lay down all our pain, all our burdens, and making sure that we do get those things out. Some of us, though, we have learned to judge ourselves when we feel emotions, when we need to cry. We have learned to feel ashamed of that. And like I said, it it makes us human to feel. I think it's so important that we don't judge ourselves. We don't have shame. Our emotions are meant to flow through us. I truly believe that, but we have so much resistance because of certain things we've been taught. And we live in a society that, like I said, practically brainwashes you to carry all this pain around rather than it being able to get out of us, emotions being able to flow through us. So, yeah, I just want to say, God is not the one looking down on you, that when you're upset, thinking, you need to toughen up, or, what you're feeling isn't valid. No, God is the person that, everything we feel is welcome. And He wants us to bring everything that we feel to Him and to help us navigate through those hard and painful emotions. Not to try to sort them out on our own. Yeah. The second thing I want to mention is, I believe it's so important that we understand God's love for us. Okay? It's not religion. It's truly a relationship with God. And for anyone that wonders, what do I mean when I say relationship? I mean, the way you would have a relationship with another person. Okay? You spend time with them, you'd get to know them, get to know their voice. You would tell them about your life. You would tell them, what's going on in your life, what's your struggles, what's your pain. And I'm talking about if it was a healthy, positive relationship that you were in, these are the things you do to build a relationship with someone. It is not that different with God. With God, it's very similar. We spend time with Him. We spend time talking to Him in prayer. We spend time reading His Word. We spend time with Him. We spend time with God, getting to know who He is, getting to know His voice when He is ministering to us, when He is leading us. And then, we share our lives with God, the things going on in them, etc. That is having a relationship with God. And It's about knowing the love that he has for you. Because I believe that's where real healing happens, and I'm going to get into that, how that works. But knowing the love he has for you, knowing the rest you have in his love, not religion. Knowing that you're already loved by him so deeply. Okay? That love and approval we look for in this life, if you can relate to that, you're already loved in that way you look to be. That is already the truth. And understanding that and sinking into that love, that is the reality of your existence. And so when we don't see it as a relationship, okay, and we learn to interact with God from this religious standpoint, there's no rest found in that, okay? And we're trying to gain his love, we're trying to gain his acceptance. And for many of us, you know, we've already seen the toll it can take physically when we are trying to be that person that will be loved and cared about, that we learn to be in our lives based on different experiences we go through. But for many of us, we then take that person, especially if we didn't feel love, like hardly at all. And what we will do is we will try to be that person for God, to try to earn his love, to try to earn his acceptance. Okay? And like I said, for those that dealt with abuse, for those that did not feel loved or dealt with a lot of rejection in your life, that will be to an even more heightened level for some, where now you haven't received that love in your life. Well, now you look at God and it becomes this heightened thing where it's like, I need to do everything I can to make sure God is pleased with me and that he's not upset with me and he loves me and that I have his acceptance. And I want you to know that's not the way God designed things. That's man-made. That's religion. That's what we learn in Christianity sometimes, this religious mindset. But that is not how God sees you. That is not God's love for you. It is unconditional, okay? I want you to just take that in and just take that in and just know that you can just sink into that love that he has for you, that there is rest in that love that he has for you, okay? Even if no one else has ever loved you in that way, he loves you in that way. Where you are loved, you are accepted more than you can even imagine. Okay? And I just believe in general, it is so important, it is so healing for us as humans to just believe that we are loved, because when we don't, obviously it really affects us. Okay? So whether you're Christian or not on this channel, I just encourage you, because I did not see myself in this way for a long time, to believe that. Believe that you are loved no matter what you've been through. Because even if you have a hard time believing God loves you, but that is the truth, there's someone out there that loves you. But I believe we were made to be in relationship with God. God longs to have a relationship with every single person. He longs to have a relationship with every single one of you on this channel. And like I said, it's a relationship. It's not religion. It is really you coming to the knowledge of his love for you and how much he loves you. And why is this so important? Why is this so important that we are not, we are understanding this and not understanding it from this place of religion? Because if we go back to your soul and your heart, your soul is your mind, will, and emotions, right? And we said your emotions are connected to your heart, okay? So for many of us, when we go through things in this life, right, painful experiences, traumatic experiences, it's almost like your soul feels like it's shattered, okay? And we said your soul is your mind and will and emotions, okay? So obviously it affects our minds. I believe when we go through trauma, when we go through pain, it can lead to mental health struggles later. But I believe it's really how the mind has processed these experiences. But if we look at the soul, okay, and the soul is mind, will, and emotions, okay, and then look at the heart is connected to the emotions, okay. For many of us, when we go through different experiences, it feels like your soul is shattered. It feels like your heart is just broken and wounded and bleeding and shattered, okay. This is why I believe that true healing, deep healing, is something that only God can bring. Okay, if we look at like medication to help things, and I'm not discounting medication at all, and I'm not encouraging someone to stop taking medication, but if we look at medication, okay, essentially it helps with the emotional turmoil, okay, and it helps with the mind, okay, yes, okay. So it helps with the mind, and it helps with the heart, the pain that we've been through and we have felt. It helps with that emotional turmoil. But your deepest pain that you have been through in your life, okay, if we talked about how important love is and the need to be loved and cared about, okay, I've said this before, that love heals. If we talked about that, then it's like when it comes to those struggles, and I believe it's not just mental struggles we're talking about, and emotional, and when it feels like your soul is shattered and your heart is broken, but I believe like we're also talking about the physical body as well, because it's all interconnected. We're also talking about illness, we're also talking about physical maladies, pain, etc., because it's all interconnected. But if we look at that, okay, let's say this example of the soul feeling shattered, the heart feeling broken into a million pieces. I use this example because I felt like this for a very long time, and I never thought I would heal from it. I never thought I would get better from it. But I didn't understand, how did all that work? Why did this healing happen? And this is why I go into how important it is for us to know God's love and acceptance, and that we are not seeing things or seeing Him or a relationship with Him from this religious standpoint. Because we as humans, we carry all this pain, okay? We carry all this pain. You could say, we carry this pain in our soul and in our heart, okay? In the deep healing that we long for, the deep healing that only comes from love, but not just any love, but supernatural love. The very God that has created the human body knows exactly how every part of it works. The God who loves with perfect love, the God who is supernatural, who is above these pains that we deal with, okay? And I wouldn't be able to say this had I not experienced this in my life. But when it feels like your soul is shattered, your heart is broken in a million pieces, the only person that can bring that deep healing is God. And it's through His love. Okay, if we talked about all these things about how it's a fundamental core need for us to be loved and cared about, and that God is a God that has supernatural love. I'm telling you, His love is so powerful. I've heard a quote one time that love is the most powerful source. And I honestly think I agree with that. Okay, and so if we give that example, okay, of the pain that we go through in this life, when it feels like our soul is shattered, our heart is broken a million pieces. How God is the only person that can reach those deepest wounds and pain inside of us. Okay? You can also think about it this way. So God is a spirit, okay? So if we refer to the soul as our spirit as well, because essentially that's what it is, we interact with God's spirit to spirit, okay? So, yeah, we interact with God's spirit to spirit. So if our spirit essentially is our soul and it's our mind, will, and emotions, and then our emotions connected to our heart, then, and that is the very place that the pain and the trauma and the wounds are located. In our shattered soul and in our heart that feels wounded and broken in a million pieces. And essentially, that is our spirit, and we interact with God's spirit to spirit, then He's the only one that can bring that deep, supernatural healing. And then what can happen, okay? And I believe it's a restoration of love. So I believe what God does is His love, He designed things in a way where it's His love that brings restoration and restores that person that you were before the coping mechanisms, that person that you were before you learned to be a certain way, to be loved and cared about. I believe God restores back to your real self. And I believe your real self essentially is your soul, your mind, will, and emotions. Okay? And this is why I believe the enemy tries to attack that part of us so much. Not only our heart with pain, but our soul, our mind, will, and emotions. Because I believe your real self is your soul. Okay? As cheesy as that sounds, is the person that you were before you went through all these painful experiences, before you learned to be a certain way, before you learned to develop coping mechanisms. And I'm going to use this word. I know some people are going to disagree with it, but I'm going to explain it. You hear a lot of people talking about ego, okay? What I believe the ego is essentially, because I don't necessarily agree with that, but what I believe that essentially what it is essentially is the person that this false self that you develop into based on the different experiences in your life, based on the coping mechanisms. And that includes, if you went through things where you developed a sense of defensiveness, etc. That's what I believe. That's what I believe it is. And so we understand that way, okay? Like that we learn to become this person based on the different experiences we have been through in life, different painful experiences, okay? I believe what God longs to do is restore our soul, right? The Bible says He restoreth my soul. To restore our soul, to restore us back to our real self. Now, granted, are you ever going to be that original self that you were before all this pain experiences? No. And I can say that from personal experience. But can I say, God, I believe He wants to restore us back to that person that we were. Obviously, you're going to have those experiences that have come about, but that pain be healed. Yes. So I hope that makes sense. I will just say, for me, I didn't understand, God had put all these desires in me to do different things in life, and I will tell you, I fought it and I resisted it for a long time. And I felt like it wasn't okay because I learned that person and those things I wanted to do, that's not acceptable. That's not okay. But see, God wanted to restore me back to that person. Now, I'm never going to be that exact person that I used to be before all those experiences, but the things that he put inside me, that person that doesn't live in all this fear and anxiety, that person that isn't carrying all this pain, but I am being restored back to my real self, who you are in your soul, right? And we said soul is your mind, will, and emotions, who you really are, who you are beyond the pain that you've been through, beyond the traumatic experiences, who you really are. Had those things not happened to you, had those things not changed you, had those things not developed coping mechanisms within you and made you feel like there was only a certain version of yourself that was acceptable or that would be loved. And so I believe God longs to do that, okay? I believe God longs to restore that person that we really are, everything He's created us to be, who we really are. Because we think we are this person that we have learned to be with all our coping mechanisms that we've developed, and this person that we've learned, this will allow me to be loved, this will allow me to be accepted. But that's not who we really are. That's just who we've learned to be based on the different experiences that we have been through. I believe who you really are is who you are in your heart and soul. You know, not to be cheesy, but that person. And so, yes, if you look at it in this way, you know, we could say, you know, these struggles in our life arise from these different experiences that we've been through, these different painful experiences. But if you look at it in this way, that pain is from the enemy of our soul. If you look at it in this way, it makes sense why the enemy tries to attack our soul, tries to bring all this pain in, and tries to go for our hearts. Because, you know, not only does it really affect us when we go through things, and then it affects, you know, all of this that is interconnected, but because I believe that person that you really are, you know, your real self is your soul. And I hope this is making sense and not just sounding all over the place, but I believe our soul is what makes us alive. Our soul is, because it's our mind, will, and emotions, it is essentially what allows us to be conscious of the different experiences we go through in this human experience that we live. But I believe there are many things we go through in this life that affect our soul, that affect our heart, that affect our mind, will, and emotions. And then in turn, all this stuff is interconnected. So I believe this is something that God wants to restore in people. But I believe that full restoration happens, that deep, deep healing through Him, through His love, through the healing that only He can bring. And if you understand it in this way, understanding the love, understanding the rest found in His love, if we are living from this religious place, and I'm talking about just not knowing the love that He has for you, the truth of how much He loves you, the truth of the love and acceptance that He already has for you, and learning to live from this place of relationship rather than religion. Because I believe that's what God does with people more than anything, is this relationship, because He sees your pain. And when we live from this place of religion, we don't really understand His love for us. And I believe the enemy tries to get people living in that place to try to keep a healing from happening, because it's through that place of relationship, it's through that place of us connecting with God, you know, spirit to spirit, that healing happens, that healing is able to happen in our heart and soul. And that restoration of who we really are and everything He's created us to be is allowed to happen. And by allowed to happen, I just mean the way that perhaps it was designed to, that the enemy tries to attack. Okay, so I'm trying to think if I've kind of gone over everything that I can. I was going to go into rest, how rest works. I'll just go into how God designed it physically to work. Rest and digest mode is when our body is not in fight or flight mode. It is the optimal place our body can be in health-wise, because we're not in fear and anxiety, which, as we mentioned, leads to a weakened immune system. So when we are in a place of rest, and I said when we are in a place of rest, our minds are at rest, our souls, our spirits are at rest, our hearts are at rest, and even our bodies being at rest when we are learning to live from God's strength, or we are spending time with God and we are like just leaning back and relaxing, understanding the rest we have in His presence, or even laying down. All these parts of our body are at rest, and I believe this is a supernatural rest that God gives, that it is spiritual rest, that it's not just physical rest, but it literally refreshes and renews our souls. It restores our souls. And I believe it leaks into many other areas of life as well. I've experienced this. But I believe God designed it in this way where we are learning to live from that place of rest, and where He doesn't even want us to be afraid in this life. You know, the Bible mentions 365 times, don't be afraid, or don't, not to fear. And I believe that's a reminder from God, every day not to live our lives in fear. Obviously He knows the toll fear can take on us, not only mentally, but physically as well. But I believe, it makes me think of just all we have through God, this relationship we have with God, but also He has prepared an eternal home for us. He's prepared an eternal home. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, sure and steadfast. And if we don't have hope in this world, we have that hope. We have that heavenly, eternal hope. Because of who our God is, we have hope. And, it's like, I don't even know how to describe it. Without God, there is no hope. But we have that hope, that eternal hope. And there's also, we have this hope in other ways. The Bible talks about hope maketh not ashamed, because the love of God has been shed abroad into our hearts. And I think it all goes back to His love for us, knowing that we are loved by Him, that we can live our lives knowing that. But not only that, but He loves us so much that He has prepared a perfect place for us in heaven, in eternity one day, where we will live forever with Him. And what I believe is one of the most amazing things about heaven, I've never been to heaven, but what I believe makes it so amazing, one of the things is that people that either have not experienced love in their life, or for people that have, people will get to experience a love that they have never experienced, because all we know is human love on this earth. However, I believe God longs to be in relationship with us on this earth, for us to get to know that love even here on this earth. And I don't believe it's God's will for people to carry all of this pain from their lives for their whole lives. I really truly don't believe that's God's will. I believe that's what the enemy wants. But I believe God is the one that wants to bring that healing. But again, that healing comes through His love. And I believe having an understanding of His love and this rest we have in His love and who he is. And it's that his love also, it heals the fears that we have carried in our life. It restores a sense of safety. It casts out our anxiety. It helps us to live from a place of calm and from a place of peace, because his peace lives inside us as his spirit dwells within us. And so, I believe this is how God designed everything, and that, there's a reason that, the enemy tries to go after these things in our lives and in people's lives. But, yeah, I really hope this video I've just been fascinated thinking about it, and I could probably go into more, but this video is probably one of my longest videos at this point. I really hope this video just opened your eyes, and I hope that it fascinated you as much as it did with me. One last thing I want to say is, please look up, there is a YouTube channel. It's called Healing Journeys Today, for anyone struggling with any physical struggles. It is a Christian YouTube channel. It's all about healing. I really think it's just really great. You get to hear so many healing testimonies, really get grounded in the word. And there was a video that I saw that I just thought was so incredibly profound and amazing. And it talks about the love of God being our foundation, where hope is set. And I just thought it was so brilliant and amazing. And it's videos like that just make me want to not speak on things, because, you're just like, wow, like that was just so incredible, what this person shared in the scripture, and my goodness. But the video is called Hope Is Not Deferred, and this person, I believe her name's Raquel Johnson, but don't quote me on that. She had been healed of, I think, kidney cancer, maybe. I might be wrong though. But she shares some of the things that she learned, and she just talked about learning to have her foundation being built upon the love of God, and how important that is. And I thought it was so good. So I want to just share it with any of you, because oh my goodness, like I just was like, wow. So I hope this video really can help you guys, or just be very eye-opening and very fascinating and interesting. I love talking about these things. So if you guys ever want more, like you have questions or anything like that, a lot of these come from research or my own theories or other people's theories. But I just started making a diagram this morning, and I just wanted to go into all this. So I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you.